Salam, Shalom, and welcome to the Septuagint versus the Masoretic YouTube channel. Today we're going to look at Joshua chapter 19. There are an incredible amount of verses, actually 51 verses in this chapter. So let's begin looking through and examining the truth of the scriptures in Joshua 19. Beginning in verse 9, we see something worth mentioning. It says here, the portion of the children of Judah was greater than theirs, referring to Simeon. Versus the Masoretic saying it was too much for them. So no, it wasn't too much for them. The portion given to the children of Judah was not too much for them. It was simply greater than what was given to Simeon. That's just factual. It's not that they couldn't handle it. It was just greater. Okay. So we're going to skip a lot of the notes here. You can refer to them in the description box. A lot of different names and so on. Verse 15, this is a notable place, notable name Jericho or Jericho versus Idalah. So two very different names. It's not even close. And then Baethman or Baethman versus Bethlehem. Somewhat close. I'm not going to say it's 100% match, but maybe 60% match. Verse 17, we have an addition for the children of Isaachar. And we're going to skip over those ones. In verse 22, there's an addition of 16 cities with their villages. So that description of the numbers, cities being counted, were added to the text in the Masoretic. And automatically when we say added, that means Masoretic was added. When I talk about something being omitted, that is automatically the Masoretic omitting something from the original text. In verse 26, different names are used again, except Elimelech and Carmel. So Elimelech and Carmel are the only ones that are the same. However, names such as Amiel being used is not being used here in the Masoretic. It is called Amad. And then of note, this place here, Zion and Labanath, here being called Shihorlibnath, one place instead of two. Okay, in verse 27, talks about westward versus toward the sun rising. Well, the sun rises in the east, so that's not even the same direction. Okay, we're going to skip over these names. Again, many different names. In verse 30, there's an addition of, again, describing the numbers of 22 cities. Verse 33, different names in that verse as well, except for Jordan or Jordan or Yardan. Verse 35, this is an important omission. I feel it is omitting the people called the Tyrians, the walled cities of the Tyrians. They belong to the Tyrians, versus the fenced cities belonging to nobody, apparently. Okay, skipping over those verses. In verse 38, again, a description of the numbers of the cities, which are 19 in the Masoretic. Coming to the tail end of this chapter, just to save you time, you can read the description box for the rest of the notes. Refer to that. A big difference, our first one in this chapter, in verse 47, Lachish or Lachish versus Lechem. And then it says that he renamed it, the sons of Dan renamed it to Lasendan, versus he called it Leshem. No, it was renamed to something completely different. So they took Lachish or Lachish, and they renamed it Lasendan. Not that they took a place called Leshem and just called it Leshem. Why would they do that? Doesn't make any sense. Unless you remove this punctuation, which I just noticed. If you remove that, called it Leshem Dan, so then that would make sense if you remove this punctuation. However, it's a little more clear in the Septuagint. It is Lasendan or Lashendan, perhaps. There's also an omission in regards to the Amorite continuing to dwell in Edom and in Salamin, and the hand of Ephraim prevailed against them, and they became tributaries to them. So the Amorites became tributaries to Ephraim. They had to pay tribute. So that was completely removed in the Masoretic text, that fact. Verse 48, we continue on with more big differences, and this is another omission. Talks about how the children of Dan did not drive out the Amorite who afflicted them in the mountain. So was the Amorite afflicting Dan in the mountain, or was this where did the Amorite live in the mountain? So it can be interpreted either or. And it also further goes on to detail that the Amorite would not suffer them to come down into the valley. So it seems to be that the Amorite is afflicting the children of Dan in the mountain. Otherwise, how else would they not be able to come down into the valley if they were not being afflicted in the mountain and sort of isolated in that area? So as to prevent them from coming down into the valley, where would they be? In the mountain. Makes sense. But they forcibly took from them, the Amorite did, the border of their portion, or it can be interpreted, I'm going to keep an open mind that it could be they, referring to the children of Dan, forcibly taking the Amorites' border to be part of their portion. Okay, more big differences. In verse 49, they proceeded to take possession of the land. So this is children of Dan taking possession of the land according to their borders, versus when they made an end of dividing the land for inheritance by their coasts. So we can see clearly in the Septuagint that the children of Dan acquired the land of the Amorite, it seems, via warfare, by violence, physical violence. They did not acquire this land peacefully, as the Masoretic seems to imply, because there is no mention of war. Okay, verse 51. The doors of the tabernacle of testimony, they went to take possession of the land, versus the tabernacle, the door of the tabernacle of the congregation. Again, this is not the tabernacle of the congregation. This is the tabernacle which its focus is housing the Ark of the Covenant, which is the testimony. It's another way to say Ark of the Covenant, the testimony, because it is a witness of, it is evidence and proof, contains many evidences inside of it. So they made an end of dividing the country. Again, it's not peaceful. It's not just peacefully dividing the country. They had to wage war and take this land forcibly. Okay, and that's all for this chapter. I hope it was a little more efficient, especially considering there's 51 verses in this chapter. So thank you very much for your support. Please like and subscribe if you have not. If you have, thank you very much. Appreciate all the support and views and comments. I appreciate that very much. Again, this is the only ministry of its kind on the planet that looks at the truth of the Bible, of the Holy Bible, looking at the oldest translation of the scriptures, which is the Septuagint, which predates the existence of Jesus Christ as human being, about 200, 300 years. And the Masoretic text, which came after Jesus Christ died and resurrected, and was not completely finalized until centuries later, some say even a millennia after. So that's what we do in this channel. We started in Genesis, and we aim to finish in the end of the prophets. I believe that's Malachi. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, once again. Salam, shalom, shalom, and Maranatha. Until next time, we'll look at Joshua chapter 20.
Thank you.